Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, welcome, my friends. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. I certainly did. It's good to be back here behind the microphone, however. Thank you for joining us. Clearing my throat here as we get started into broadcast excellence here, my friends. I got a question, or I guess a comment that I had heard over the weekend. Someone had said redistricting is complicated. They don't know what they think about it. And I realized, given what's happening here in Indiana, and by the way, yes, I am in Indiana. Yes, this show is, this show is, we talk about national issues on this program. We don't just talk about local things, but this matters at a national level. This may have happened in your state. It could happen in your state if it hasn't. This discussion about redistricting. I want to talk about why it matters. I want to go through the kind of explanation of what's happening. And I also want to help you cut through the noise because it really isn't complicated. There can be strong opinions about this issue on both sides, but it's not complicated. It is a political process. Indiana needs representation that actually reflects who we are, not whatever Washington is trying to force upon us through these leftists that have taken control of today's Democrat Party. So that is what I want to talk about on the program today, my friends. And again, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you had a great time. Here we are in December, last month of the year. It's absolutely crazy, my friends, that we are about to complete the year 2025. It is just remarkable how fast time goes, but we will embark upon that journey together, my friends, as we tackle this the last month of 2025. Friends, let's face it, there are a lot of companies out there that don't share your Christian values. The good news is that you do not have to invest in them. At 48 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. They'll help you screen out companies that go against your faith, your values, and create a plan that's tailored to your goals. And they'll handle all the heavy lifting for you so that you can focus on what really matters. If you want to see if your current investments align with your values or to what degree they do align with your values, go to 48financial.com/Todd. Again, that's 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, because your values matter, and friends, of course, so does your money. Okay, let's get started today. Let's talk about redistricting, what's happening here in my state, what may be happening in your state, or at least other states in your great nation here. Redistricting. So let's back up here in my state. Let me give you some information about what has happened. Kind of set the stage here. A month or so ago, Indiana Governor Mike Braun called for a special session of the General Assembly, the House and Senate here in the state of Indiana, so that they could meet to discuss the issue of redistricting. Now, this, of course, has been done in Texas. This has been done in Missouri. This has been done, it has been voted to be done in California and so forth. This is an important issue. Now, why does it matter first? Well, I'll tell you why it matters, because we're embarking upon a midterm election that is staring us down the face. That's about 11 months from now. In 11 months, we will be having another vote here in this country to determine the makeup of the next U.S. Congress, the House and the Senate. Democrats see an opportunity to win the Senate. Republicans see the House. The Republicans see an opportunity to hold the House. But it's very tight. I mean, there's no room for error right now when you look at the House of Representatives. And so we lose a couple seats, we lose the power. What happens if we lose control of the House? Well, if Republicans lose control of the House, that is a virtual end of Trump's political agenda. That is bringing to an end the things Trump is doing to fix this nation after the hell we went through over the previous 4 years under the Biden administration. You think about open borders, you think about high inflation, you think about woke agenda and nonsense that's ravaged this great nation. That is what we're talking about. But it's more than just that. It's more than just that. The left has proven without any doubt whatsoever that they are prepared to weaponize the government to go after their political enemies. This is called lawfare. They are prepared to use the law as an instrument of political war. We've seen this happening. This is undeniable. And so not just are we looking at the end of Trump's agenda, which is clearly for the interests of Americans when it comes to our prosperity, when it comes to our safety, when it comes to our national defense, when it comes to restoring decency as far as how things are managed in the international community. I mean, it's amazing to me how much the left is willing to put up with crazy stuff that happens around the globe. How many times we even fund some of that crazy stuff. In fact, you think about Doge and some of the things they uncovered, some of the dollars that were being sent overseas and all that sort of stuff for some of these insane and ridiculous policies and so forth. So that is what is at stake. So if Democrats win Congress, there will be other impeachment inquiries that he probably will be impeached again, or very likely, or quite possibly anyway, impeached again for no reason yet again. There will be endless investigations. It will become a sideshow. They will waste more of your money. The work necessary to continue to clean up what has happened over the past 4 years and what has happened in another sense over the past 50 through the gradual growth of the bureaucratic state, that will not stop. That is the greatest risk to your liberty. That is what's at stake here. That is what's at stake. I would say the stakes are high. I would say the stakes are incredibly high. And so Trump has basically started calling governors of Republican states and saying, hey, can you get us a couple of more districts so that we can secure the House of Representatives? Now, this bothers some people, and I understand it bothers people because they think, well, he's just basically going out there and asking for states to somehow squeeze a couple of Republican seats out of their congressional districts and so forth. Yeah, he is. But see, here's what's interesting. This stuff has always happened. It just always has happened behind closed doors. There's nothing new that's happening here. Now, it is new in the sense that we are redistricting in the middle of a decade, which I'll get to in a moment. But that's the background here. Now, the other thing that's happening here is that ask yourselves this. Ask yourself, of the people that you know here in the Hoosier State, for those of you who are here, or if you're in Missouri, if you're in Texas, ask yourselves, to what degree do the national Democrats, the elected leaders in Washington, D.C., to what degree do they reflect the values and beliefs of Democrats that you know? Because I will tell you, I know Democrats who are liberal. I know Democrats who are blue dog Democrats. I don't know. I know that they're out there. I'm not trying to just brush it under the rug, but there are not many radical leftist Democrats in places like Indiana. They certainly exist. There's a lot of them down at IU Bloomington. There's a lot of them running around in the city of Indianapolis telling us all sorts of things that just aren't true in exchange for not doing anything when they have political power to, say, stop the violence, to clean up the city, that sort of stuff. But there aren't many rank and file in flyover country in everyday USA that are radical leftists. But that is what the National Democrat Party has become. I mean, they are now a party of open borders. They are a party that is openly embracing Marxists. I mean, look at Zoran Mamdani in New York City. They are welcoming people who are at best, quote unquote, democratic socialists. It makes it okay, I guess, to take people's possessions if you have a majority of people agreeing with you that you should take away their liberty. Who cares what the Constitution says about their individual liberty? By the way, the smallest minority is the minority of one. That's the minority that the Constitution sought to protect through the Bill of Rights. But you have so many people who want to target people who they think are the problem. They want them to pay. They want to have their money taken away, redistributed, all that sort of stuff. And of course, none of these things actually ever work. Socialism fails every time that it's tried. By the way, Mamdani, at worst, is a Marxist, so a communist. So there are not many people in the Democrat Party that I know, rank and file, that would classify themselves as a communist, even as a socialist. Now, is that more appealing in today's Democrat Party than it was 20 years ago? You betcha. It certainly is. But this is not something that is still common amongst Democrats in flyover country, in Indiana, for example. So what happens is they elect people here in Indiana who position themselves oftentimes as moderate Democrats, as reasonable Democrats. I had Bo Bai on this program. Bo Bai, he's running for, Secretary of State. And it is, Bo Bai is not a radical leftist. He's a liberal, left-leaning Democrat here in a red state. But what happens when people like Bo Bai elect Democrats to represent them nationally, they end up fueling an agenda that is not pursuing Hoosier values. You think back to what the left was pushing upon us just a few short months ago when they were in power, and you think, my goodness, how did we even survive? You talk about absolute depravity and godlessness and socialism and all of that. And we're coming off, of course, our last episode was Wednesday, where I told the true story of Thanksgiving, which is my favorite episode of the year. If you missed it, I encourage you to listen to it, because they are literally refusing to, the radical left, they're refusing to learn the true story, the true lesson of Thanksgiving, and they want to repeat the mistakes made by the Pilgrims, made by the people who funded the Pilgrims, prior to the Pilgrims realizing that the socialist compound they were sent to would not work. In fact, it was part of the reason that people were suffering and dying. Some people have refused to learn that lesson. But those are not average Hoosiers. Those are not average people in the state of Missouri or North Carolina or Texas. They might be average in some of these insanely radical states, but that's not common here in Indiana. And so what happens is they vote for people. If Democrats win here, they elect people to lead the House of Representatives or the Senate. Now, the Senate is not impacted by gerrymandering. I'm just explaining the picture overall. Or I should say redistricting or gerrymandering, depending upon your definitions here, which we'll get to. And so we have this scenario whereby we have radical representation in Washington, D.C., the leadership who drives the agenda, and then these Democrats that are elected here who either are not allowed to be as moderate by their leadership, or maybe they're not as moderate as they've told their voters that they are, as middle of the road or just slightly liberal Democrats. When they go to Washington, their vote becomes a movement for radical leftism. Now, when you have, this is one of the things that I get upset with the political right, Republican Party, is that they are afraid to use legitimate political power when they have it. The General Assembly can absolutely, according to the Constitution, redraw these districts. But they're afraid, some of them are afraid to do it because it gives off the appearance that they're not being fair to Democrats. I want to go through this. What constitutes, by the way, my friends, a fair district? I'll tell you right now, we're in a fight for the survival of this republic, for the rule of law and order. And it is past time for Republicans to be prepared to do whatever it takes, legally, ethically, morally, to win these political battles. The stake, or I should say the survival of the republic that we live in is truly at stake. I know that sounds maybe slightly melodramatic. I've thought this for a long time, but until recent years, many people would have said that was dramatic. I think here over the past few years, given the fact that people are being, Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Trump was shot, someone else was targeting to take Trump's life. I mean, you don't have to look at this stuff very long to see the anger and the rage, the inability of one side to listen to the perspective, beliefs of the other side, to see that we're in a political hotbed, just a mess. We're in the middle of it. And I've said before that somebody has to win this. You cannot compromise with two diametrically opposed ideas and worldviews and philosophies. They cannot coexist and run a government efficiently. One side is going to have to win. And dare I say, it must be the side of constitutional conservatism. It must be the side that is rooted in Western thought. It must be the side that believes in liberty and the principles set forth by our founders when they formed this great nation. It absolutely had better be people on our side that are going to win this. You're not going to win this by running for the hills when this gets a little bit heated. So, let's talk about redistricting specifically. I'll go through Indiana's situation. The governor called for the special session. Rod Bray, the leader of the Senate here in Indiana, would not convene a special session. And so what they decided to do through pressure, and by the way, many of you in this audience I know are asserting pressure on Congress, on your state senator, to do the right thing here and have a transparent discussion about this. That's what needs to happen. There needs to be a transparent discussion about this. There can't be any backroom deals. There can't be any private conversations where Rod Bray, who, by the way, is my state senator, but his behavior here is completely unacceptable to me. I'm a constituent of his. Still haven't heard the slightest bit from him. I have emailed, called, left messages, invited him on this program, asked for anything. He gives us very, very little information, next to no information whatsoever. I don't know if he thinks this is going away. It 100% isn't. Rod, if you're listening, if someone who knows Rod is listening, this is not going away. I'm not letting up. Scott Presler is coming to Indiana. By the way, if you don't know Scott Presler, he's one who was very instrumental in helping Trump win the election. Very instrumental in swinging Pennsylvania. Scott Presler has said he's coming to Indiana. He is going to be involved in primarying anyone of Republicans who vote against redistricting. This matters that much, and folks in the Republican Party had best be prepared to at least have a debate, an open discussion about this. If you want to conclude that we shouldn't redistrict, then go on the record and tell us why. Don't hide behind this make-believe conversation that we're having where Rod Bray just tells you how many Senate votes there are. That is not leadership. That is not transparency. You deserve better. than that, my friends. I deserve better than that. Rod doesn't owe me a conversation on this program. He owes me something as a constituent, and he's not provided it. That is 100% unacceptable. I don't care, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Communist, whatever. That is 100% unacceptable. And he's hidden. I mean, I can't think about this. We've had Eric Trump, Mark Levin, I've had Marsha Blackburn, Mark Meadows, Kayleigh McEnany. We haven't done a lot of interviews historically, but we've had Joni Ernst, of course, Governor Braun, Micah Beckwith, Bo Bai, and I can't get my local state senator to come on here and talk. That's a problem, my friends. Again, he doesn't owe it to me as a host of the podcast, but he does owe it to the people that vote for him to get the message out, and he's not doing it. I feel like this would be I'll be fair to him. I don't agree with what I've heard. He should maybe know that coming in. I'm going to ask him about it, and maybe that's what he's afraid of. But how are you going to represent people? How are you going to make the tough decisions necessary in your position if you can't even deal with the slightest bit of scrutiny and just people asking for transparency? It's pathetic. It's not leadership. And he's the leader of the Senate in the state of Indiana. It's just embarrassing. Why do you ask yourself this if you live in Indiana? Why do you know more about my opinions on redistricting as a talk show host and podcaster than you do about the person who actually can have a say in whether or not we do it? That's preposterous. Said absolutely no, it's not leadership that needs to be addressed immediately. But I've heard nothing, literally nothing. I wrote an open letter to a local publication. I posted it. By the way, I shared that letter in our newsletter, I think on Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. Shared it on social media as well. Still nothing. Tagged him, nothing. Crickets. Avoiding the issue, hiding. It's not going away, Rod. I can assure you of that. More to say on this, though. More to say on this, my friends. I want to remind you that we have a division here at the Todd Huff Show called Red, White, and Brand. We help put your logo on almost anything, and we're here to help you, your business, your nonprofit organization, get things like apparel with your logo or signage, trade show materials, print materials, you name it. redwhiteandbrand.com is the website. redwhiteandbrand.com. Promo code Todd gets you 10% off your first order. I've got to take a quick time out, my friends. You're listening here to the home of conservative, not bitter talk, talking about redistricting, why it matters. And I'll do that, continue that conversation after the break, my friends. Welcome back, my friends. Talking here about redistricting. That's what I want to get to today. Specifically, I know that this is Indiana-centric, but it really isn't, because this battle has been waged and is continuing to be waged here across the country. It's just happening here in my state now, and so I want to talk about it. My friends, let's face it, though, living with discomfort can be tough, and while prescription medications can help you, they often come with a long, long list of side effects, not to mention the risk of dependency. That's why more people are exploring natural options. Have you noticed that there's a movement away from the, what's become standard, health care and treatment care and all that sort of stuff? A movement towards more natural things doesn't mean you have to abandon all, modern medicine to see the value in looking at natural options. Some people are looking at things like Kratom from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. It's a family-run company. They do things the right way. They work directly with Indonesian farmers. They lab test every batch, my friends, to make sure they're not giving you the synthetic chemical junk and surprises you get from other products that are not natural. They're synthetic. This is honest, natural Kratom. It's been used for generations. The problems, of course, come from these synthetic blends and the contaminated junk that Christopher's is trying to fight against. They're trying to educate people and deliver real, clean Kratom. They want to keep you informed as well. You can find out more information by going to their websites, Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. You can make a purchase, too, once you're comfortable, have done your research. Start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Use code ToddHuff. You'll save 10% off your first purchase. Again, Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, transparency, tradition. Okay, so really, let's go through the basics here. Indiana has 9 congressional districts. Currently, there are 7 Republicans elected in those districts. 2 of them are Democrats. Districts, the lines of those districts are drawn by the legislature. Now, some states have third parties get involved, but ultimately the power to draw district lines is reserved to the state legislature. These are traditionally drawn every 10 years after the U.S. Census takes place, which happens it'll happen in 2030. So districts will be drawn then. Sometimes states gain a district or 2. Sometimes they lose a district or 2. Wait to see what happens if a couple of things continue. Number 1, the deportation of illegal aliens. That is going to impact these districts. Number 2, did you know, by the way, Biden counted illegal aliens in the census, which of course impacted the size of congressional districts? It's true. How many states or how many districts each state got? 100% true. You want to talk about something that's more problematic than redrawing your state's congressional district boundaries? How about allowing people that aren't even supposed to be here to impact the count and the allocation of congressional districts across this country? Now, the legislature has a prerogative to revisit those district maps at any time. And so that's what's happened here. Indiana was initially, the governor called a special session. The Senate refused to do it. Rod Bray said that there were not the votes, didn't really tell us much else about it, hasn't shared much information whatsoever. But due to the pressure, again, put upon them by you and other folks here in the country, locally and nationally, they decided that they would basically start the general session, which was slated to start in January, started early. In fact, starting it today. And one of the things they would take up in this session would be the issue of redistricting. House is returning to address this. And of course, the Senate has said they don't have the votes. But again, this is being basically thrust upon them to at least have a conversation. So, I've already explained to you, I've contacted his office multiple times, Rod Bray, to talk about this. He said the Senate doesn't have the votes. Hasn't really said much else. I think that this is exactly the wrong way, regardless of his final vote. It's the wrong way to deal with this. It's not transparent. There's no accountability here. Backroom deals and behind closed doors conversations are not the way to deal with this. So no engagement, no transparency. That's part of the bigger issue we have with with government at large. It doesn't seem to care about us. Doesn't even feel it necessary to tell us why it's doing what it does. I mentioned to you Scott Pressler earlier, last segment, has said he's going to support primary challengers against any Indiana Republican who votes against redistricting, and the pressure is being cranked up. I heard someone say, and I forget who it was, but this issue of redistricting, it might have been someone who was sharing some feedback they've gotten from Missouri. It might have been Micah Beckwith, who mentioned to me, he might have even said it on the program, that the intensity surrounding the issue of redistricting was the most intense fight politically an individual in Missouri had ever dealt with. So that is what we may be headed for here in Indiana. Now, I mentioned that national Democrats, they do not reflect the values, certainly of Indiana Republicans, and I would say the majority of Indiana Democrats. But that is who we end up empowering every time we send a Democrat to Congress from Indiana to Washington, D.C. And again, I laid out earlier, if Democrats win in 2026, investigations, lawfare, impeachments, weaponization of government, and the ending of policies that are fixing the mess created by the Biden regime. Now, Indiana must consider openly, transparently, whether its current delegation accurately reflects the state's values and the state's priorities. That's how I see this. Now, people on the other side don't want to lose congressional seats, and I understand that. But it's much more complicated than that. Some people will say, well, you can't gerrymander to get what you want. As I've said on this program, gerrymandering refers specifically to drawing districts that are just very oddly shaped in order to clearly win a political advantage. This, by definition of where, having blue cities and basically red suburbs and rural areas around this country. This, by definition, is primarily a Democratic phenomenon, something that's done almost exclusively by Democrats. The term, by the way, gerrymander, was coined in 1812 when a district drawn in Massachusetts under Governor Elbridge Gerry actually looked like a salamander, and so they started calling this a gerrymander. Historically, gerrymandering refers to absurd, contorted, unnatural shapes engineered for political advantage. Indiana's districts do not match the historical criterion, and I suspect the districts that would be redrawn would not meet that criteria either. Now, with some revisionists out there, political scientists and journalists and everything else, they want you to believe gerrymandering means drawing a district that politically favors the party in power. But the problem is, this has always been by definition, this is how you do this. There are no lines, there are no shapes declared by God from heaven in the scriptures that say this district, a fair district, needs to be in the shape of a square or of a long rectangle or maybe a wide rectangle. I mean, there is no right way to draw a district. There are no guaranteed Democrat districts. There are no guaranteed Republican districts. Democrats and Republicans and whoever else meets the criteria to run for office can absolutely run in the district, whatever its final shape is, so far as they meet that criteria. So there are no Democrat districts. There are no Republican districts. Republicans are going to have to win any district that's drawn. And if Democrats want to win districts that are drawn, and they have to be more moderate, and they have to quit electing radical leadership in Washington, D.C. in order to win, then that is a wonderful thing for the state of Indiana. That is a wonderful thing for people in this country. Even if we could return to a place, I'm not saying we'll get there, but if there's a lot of political pressure for the Democrat Party to abandon the leftist ideology it has embraced, then that is a good thing. That is at odds with our founding. That is dangerous. When you talk about domestically, the greatest danger we face, it is the ideology of the extreme godless radical left. I have to take a time out. Long this segment, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking here about redistricting. I'd gotten a comment over the weekend that someone had said redistricting is complicated and confusing. They didn't know their opinion on it, so I'm trying to go through that today. It applies here in Indiana. It has applied in other states. It may apply in other states as we move forward here, and it's important. This has national implications. The success of this vote could absolutely determine who's in charge of Congress in, it would be 2027, I guess. The 2026 midterms will determine who's in Congress at the beginning of January 2027. And so that could shape things dramatically. And again, where could we head? To the weaponization of government, to the interference with clearly things that need to be done for our national security, for border security, for law and order, those sorts of things. A lot, my friends, hang in the balance. This constitutional republic, I don't know what would have happened if if Harris would have won the election, but it would not have been good. I don't know how much this nation can endure. We can't just stop the onslaught. We just can't stop or slow the gradual erosion of liberty. We have to reverse it. It's not enough to simply tamp the brakes. We have to throw this thing in reverse, turn around, and move ourselves back towards liberty. This fight is for the very survival. Sometimes I feel like we have conversations that are so that miss the point. Well, I don't want to be called someone who gerrymandered. I don't want to be unfair to Democrats. Well, what does that even mean? If Democrats would be reasonable, if Democrats would put forth candidates that aren't radicals or that don't vote for radical leadership, then this problem would be solved. If Democrats want to have more of an appeal here in Indiana, then be more appealing. People vote. Districts don't vote. No one's being stopped from voting. It's just the way that the votes are pooled together. And Democrats had best figure out how to adjust. That, to me, my goodness, it's not just about Republican victory. It's about victory for liberty. It's about victory for free market economies. It's about the defeat of the radical left's agenda, the abandonment of the godless radical left worldview and ideology. That's what's at stake here, my friends. That's absolutely what is at stake here. I've got some concluding thoughts on this, but friends, I want to remind you as well that, look, it might be time. If your financial world has gotten a little complicated, it might be time to abandon the one-size-fits-all advice that you get from some folks and look to Full Suite Wealth. That's where they shine because they give you customized solutions. They specialize in working with families and individuals that are at your level, offering personalized guidance that goes far beyond those basics. From private equity to private credit to option strategies, coordinated legal planning, Full Suite Wealth helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy. It's all about having a dedicated team, and Jason and his team will be dedicated to you, help to guide you every step of the way so you can focus on what really matters to you, your family, your goals, your future. If you want real confidence in your financial life, visit fullsuitewealth.com. That is fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy. Secure your future. So, districts are just the boundaries. People still vote. Democrats can still win elections if they return to planet Earth. And if they stop enabling lawfare, if they stop trying to rewrite the Constitution, if they stop pursuing radically insane leftist policies, this is in your best interest. Friends, again, I've said before, we must win these political battles. You hear me from time to time reference what I call the 7 pillars of propaganda. And basically, that's 7 key pillars of our society that the left has overtaken. They've overtaken these 7 key pillars of society. They include things like the government. They include things like entertainment. They include things like academia, which I talked about a little bit in today's Todd Talk. By the way, do you know that nearly 2/3 of Americans do not think a college degree is worth it any longer? That's what today's Todd Talk's about. But regardless, my friends, we have the left that's running all of these pillars, and they've used their power to kind of in a drip, drip, drip fashion to influence people favorably towards Marxism, towards socialism, away from the Constitution. And we have to win these battles. There's multiple fronts for these battles. One of the battles, however, is in government. It is fought politically, and we had better do whatever it takes, legally, ethically, morally, to win. And redistricting is a common sense way to fight against some of these godless, insane, dangerous positions, issues, ideologies that we're fighting on the national stage. It at least needs to be debated. You can draw a different conclusion if you want, but it at least needs to be debated in a transparent fashion, not being hidden behind the scenes by people like Rod Bray. We got to say enough of that stuff. We got to insist that they have this conversation and this debate. The stakes are high. I am out of time. Have a great day, my friends. SDG.